This is called Tractatus theologico-politicus, a critical inquiry into the history, purpose, and authenticity of the Hebrew Scriptures by Benedictus de Spinoza. It was published in 1862, but it has entries from earlier dates. We're going to take a look at page 19. It's in Roman numerals, so just keep that in mind if you look it up on your own. Or we're going to start on page 18, actually. Now, this page is talking about a Portuguese Jew by the name of Baruch Spinoza. Let's see what it says about him. It says, to this closing period belong the details as to Spinoza's manner of life collected by Colorus. We started here just to see who was being talked about. It says Spinoza. And over here on page 19 at the top, it says he was of middle size. He had good features in his face. The skin somewhat black curled hair, long eyebrows, and of the same color, so that one might easily know by his looks that he was descended from Portuguese Jews. So the writer here is saying that Baruch Spinoza, a Portuguese Jew, his skin was somewhat black. He had black curled hair, long eyebrows, and it was easy to tell from his looks that he was descended from Portuguese Jews. Now, when this book is mentioned or brought up, what people will normally do is they'll pull up this supposed picture of Baruch Spinoza. This is supposedly him. We're going to get into this and examine this in a second. Baruch Spinoza was a Dutch philosopher of Portuguese Jewish origin, born in Amsterdam. All right, now let's examine this for a second. The book we just read, let's go back to it. This is the first book we read on a description of what Portuguese Jews look like. And then afterwards, I went to these two modern scholars to confirm that the translation of the word black is correct. So right here it says, "'Tis also a vulgar error that the Jews are all black, for this is only true of the Portuguese Jews, who marrying always among one another beget children like themselves, and consequently the swarthiness of their complexion is entailed upon their whole race, even in the northern regions." Now, let's stop for a second before moving on. He's talking about Portuguese Jews being black. And they always keep coming out black because they marry amongst one another. So, with that in mind, let's move on to here. He says, but the Jews who are originally of Germany, those, for example, I've seen at Prague, are not blacker than the rest of their countrymen. So, like I said earlier, he's making a clear distinction between Portuguese Jews and German Jews. He's saying the Portuguese Jews are black. So very quickly, I want to jump into this book and use it as a supplementary source to show that it was known and common for Sephardic Jews to be compared to Germans in a manner that clearly distinguished them from one another in terms of skin complexion. Spanish and Portuguese Jews, aka Sephardic Jews, were known to be blacker or darker than Germans. So here's another book we're going to take a quick look at. It's called A Treatise on Physical Geography. This is the entire title right here, by A. Barrington, published in 1850. You may or may not have seen this book before. We're going to be on page 297. We're going to jump straight to the point right here. Thus the Jews are a people who have ever, according to the prophecy, dwelt alone, without intermixing with the nations, to this day. Now this separate race, all descended from brown ancestors, for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob must have been as dark as Mar Yohanan, if not darker, exhibit every shade of color, from the black Jews of Malabar, of whom we have such an interesting account by Dr. Claudius Buchanan, to the rose and lily complexion of the Jewesses on the banks of the Elbe. So clearly the context of this page is different types of Jews and the different types of skin colors that they have. It's making a clear distinction between white Jews and black Jews, between black Jews and white Jews. We need go no further than the Jews of southern Spain and compare them with those of Holland and northern Germany to perceive a very striking difference. The Spanish Jew is always dark complexioned and his hair is uniformly black, whilst the German Jew is often as fair as any German and has lighter red hair with blue eyes. So one, it's talking about Spanish Jews from Spain, And if you're familiar with this portion of history, this portion of world history, you know that the Spanish Jews and the Portuguese Jews are the exact same people. Spanish Jews and Portuguese Jews are both what we would call today Sephardic Jews. Number two, this is another book comparing Spanish Jews, aka Sephardic Jews, to Germans and saying that they are darker than the Germans. And it's saying that the German Jews are as fair as any German. We all know what skin complexion and skin color Germans have. They have your typical everyday Caucasian skin color. So this is another book. The book we were just dealing with before this one was talking about how Portuguese Jews were blacker than Germans. And this one is saying the same thing about Spanish Jews. Because at the end of the day, like I said, they're the same people. It says, we need go no further than the Jews of southern Spain and compare them with those of Holland and northern Germany to perceive a very striking difference. All right? Spanish and Portuguese Jews, according to these old historical books and records, did not have the same skin color as Germans. And it's safe to use Germans as a reference point because there's no denying that German people have the same skin complexion that we see in almost every other, if not every other, group of Caucasian people in the world today. So according to this, if we look at a Portuguese Jew, a so-called Portuguese Jew juxtaposed to a German Jew, or if we, in other words, take a look at a Portuguese Jew next to a German Jew, we should see a striking difference. One should be black and one shouldn't be. They at least shouldn't be the same skin color or the same skin tone. Okay, so let's take a look again. This is Baruch Spinoza, supposedly. Let's look at a German Jew now. This is the cover of a book called German Jews and the University, 1678 to 1848. I'm going to go to a bigger image. This is a German Jew. Okay? Take a good look at him, his skin color, skin tone. Now let's go back to Baruch Spinoza, supposedly Baruch Spinoza. Do you see a striking difference? If this is Baruch Spinoza, he's supposed to be blacker than this guy, a German Jew. Baruch Spinoza, supposedly. But he's the same color as this German Jew. Let's look at some more German Jews just to, get an idea of whether or not that's an accurate, depiction of German Jews. Here's another German Jew. The fight to get citizenship for descendants of German Jews. Let's compare her to Baruch. Is he blacker than her? Let's get some more. Let me get one more example. I'm sure you guys can see all these, even though they're black and white. Let's try to find one more color one. This is a German Jew. I'm sure we get the idea. If this is Baruch Spinoza, he's supposed to be blacker than the German Jews we just looked at. But he's not. He is not. And as we move on, we're going to see why this image does not actually line up with what we're reading. Now, I wanted to show, before we move on, another example of some comments that are usually made by people who don't like information about black Sephardic Jews being brought out. I'm going to go through it quickly because it's just a bunch of nonsense. This guy, I'm sure if you've been watching any videos dealing with black Sephardic Jews on YouTube, you've likely seen this guy in the comment section. Let's take a look at what he said real quick. Your sophomoric statement fits you very well and carry you well into 2023. The Washington Haggadah, we're going to look at some Haggadahs in a second. created in 1478 by Joel Ben Simon, was given to the Library of Congress in 1916. In 2011, the Washington Haggadah was shown at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Haggadah showed that the Sephardic Jews were not black. Maimonides, Judah P. Benjamin, Hank Azaria, Benjamin D'Israel, a Jew of Sephardic origin, was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He was not black. Judah P. Benjamin was Secretary of the State for the Confederacy, and it was a Sephardic Jew, not black. Okay, like I said at the beginning of the presentation and at the beginning of this part, I'm not saying that all of them were black. I'm saying that the black ones were black and that the white ones were white. What these guys try to do is when we bring out the documents about black Sephardic Jews, they'll try to make it seem like those were white too. And we're going to get into that in a second. But as you can see, he's saying that according to the Haggadah, which are medieval depictions of Sephardic Jews, they weren't black. We're going to look at those a little bit later. We're going to look at a few examples. But they're pretty much just paintings of so-called Sephardic Jews, or supposed Sephardic Jews from the middle, I wouldn't say Middle Ages, but the medieval era. Okay, let's look at this next comment. Another guy who, trolls the comment sections of videos about Jews and Sephardic Jews. Name one European scholar who admits to altering images of Negroid Jews so as to fool people hundreds of years in the future. Typical single-threaded half-duplex logic that you exhibit continuously. So he's challenging me to provide evidence of scholars acknowledging the altering of history. Okay, so they're pretty much saying there's no images of black Sephardic Jews. They weren't black. Those documents can't be talking about black people because there's no imagery. All right. So let's move on. This is Jonathan Schorsch again. We read him just a few minutes ago. Jews and Blacks in the Early Modern World, Cambridge University Press. We're going to be on page 184 this time. We're going to start right here. While the efforts to fix the status of these various exotic Jews and Jewish communities come across as relatively neutral ethnographic observations, others possessed more ethnocentric overtones. Harold Brackman, if you look him up, he's another Jewish scholar. Harold Brackman cited the fascinating and revealing emendations. The word emendations means edits or, changes. Harold Brackman cited the fascinating and revealing emendations or changes made to the color scheme of Noah's three sons that appeared in the first printed editions of the early medieval text, Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Shem, originally black and pleasing in earlier manuscripts, was Europeanized, becoming white and pleasing. Okay? Ham's description, black as a crow, was evidently deemed too ambiguous and was changed to black and ugly. Yafet or Japheth, whose whiteness originally signified a lack, now had his whiteness transformed to correspond with the new ideals of European beauty. He became entirely white and beautiful. So we have right here a Jewish scholar in the year 2004 saying that medieval texts were changed by Europeans to make Shem white instead of black. Let's keep going to see when this happened. Brackman, unclear on when these changes were made, wrote that these editorial revisions were in place by the 16th century. From a thorough review of many manuscripts and early printed editions, I suspect that these changes derive from the 16th century itself. So let's pause for a second. The banishment of Jews in the Inquisition was in the 1400s. That's the 15th century. This scholar is saying that medieval texts that describe Shem as black were changed from black to white during the 16th century. It's the very next century. It's not a coincidence that this happened right after the Jews were banished from Spain and Portugal. They're not gonna, and another thing to note, let's use our brains here. They're not gonna just change the texts from black to white and then just leave up all the images. Hey, let's change Shem from black to white, but let's leave up a whole bunch of pictures of black Jews who lived in Spain and Portugal. That doesn't make sense. If they're trying to change something, they have an agenda, and they're not going to make it that easy to figure out that they changed things. Now, in the last days, this information is coming out, I don't know why he put this in his book, but it's there. And I'm not reading it incorrectly. He literally wrote what we just read. So that's that. When people try to use imagery or things like that to dissuade you from believing that medieval Jews were black because there's no images of them, no, that doesn't work.